Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big tournament tier list. Here in this video, alongside the additional parts that will be released later, we will be taking a look at all the major AoE4 tournaments that have happened to this day and rank them into tiers according to my feelings about them, according to objective criteria as well, and in general, how impactful these were to the AoE4 scene and how enjoyable they were for the AoE4 audience. Obviously, as every tier lists are, this is a somewhat biased opinion, but I'm trying to give a decent justification to all of my positionings. If you agree or disagree with my rankings, feel free to let me know in the comments section. And I would love to have a bit of a discussion between, the community and everybody else involved about these tournaments. With that being said, the key thing to look at when we take a look at this list of tournaments is that I had to make a somewhat arbitrary cutoff. The decision I made is that all the events above $10,000 price pool are listed over here. As I said, this is a bit of an arbitrary cutoff, but I had to make some sort of cutoff because otherwise I would have to rank a lot of smaller tournaments, some regional tournaments as well. And oftentimes, smaller tournaments don't have great coverage. A lot of people don't see them, including myself. And obviously, this means that it's very difficult to judge the game quality, the tournament quality, and all these things. And also, some of these smaller events are regional events, which are very difficult to compare to major international events. So I made this arbitrary cutoff of $10,000, and we will have 16 events to list here in this tier list. Right from the get-go, let's take the biggest one out there, Red Bull Volo Legacy. The largest event in the history of Age of Empires, $300,000 price pool, a massive land with huge production cost and massive expectations. This event delivered very well. It wanted to be the largest event in AoE4 history, in general in AoE history, and it delivered a really good production quality. Obviously, Heidelberg Castle being set up for a LAN venue is a challenge from an infrastructural standpoint, but the Red Bull team did a great job with that. The atmosphere was great, the games were great, and you really cannot criticize much about this event here. It goes into my S tier, and frankly, when you look at an event of this cost, that's the expectation. It's the biggest event in AoE4 history. It has to be S tier if it's well executed, and I think it was very well executed. Now, there were some small drawbacks of the event. One of them was that the crowd, the LAN audience, was a mix of AoE2 and AoE4 folks, because there was no separation in the tickets for the AoE2 and the AoE4 events. That basically meant that tickets sold out quickly. Most of those, from what I heard, went to AoE2 folks. So the AoE4 finals had mostly AoE2 crowd. Obviously, this could have done differently, but it is what it is. I don't think it's really that big of a deal, although I think a lot of people would have loved to be there as part of the audience. And it would have made things a little bit more intriguing for the AoE4 folks if the entire crowd was from AoE4, at least for the AoE4 segment of the event. But that's just a small thing, I think, when you look at the big picture. The other thing that was awkward is that the event used a format where you had a section for AoE2 that was like 4 days, then comes the group stage of AoE4, then the finals of AoE2, then the finals of AoE4. So you had this alternating system. This is something that was criticized by the AoE2 folks just as much as the AoE4 folks, and you had that feeling that this kind of broke the flow of the event. And maybe the event would have been a little smoother if the two games were clearly separated. Red Bull probably had the reasons to do this, so did Microsoft probably, but at the end of the day, when you look at the event, it probably would have been better if you have like clear AoE2, clear AoE4, would have been enjoyable, more enjoyable for both of these communities. Moving on, we will have the qualifier event for the major Red Bull Volo event coming up. This is Road to Red Bull Volo Legacy, which, despite the fact that it was basically the qualifier event for Red Bull Volo Legacy, it by itself was a standalone major event. It did have a price pool of about $40,000, and it was one of the longer events of the AoE4 scene. It spanned across 4 months, and it did have a weekly plus monthly structure. The way that Red Bull Volo Legacy worked, or the Road to Red Bull Volo Legacy worked, was that you had a weekly system where we had weekly mini tournaments, and everybody scored points based on placements. By the end of the event, the players placed best in the weeklies. They got a ticket as a player to Red Bull Volo Legacy, the LAN. Also, we had monthly tournaments. You could qualify to the monthly series by playing well in the weeklies associated with that month. And if you had a good run in those monthlies, you also got a ticket to Red Bull Volo Legacy. So there were two ways to qualify for the event, aside from getting some invitations from previous events. But there were two major ways. You could either be very consistent in the weeklies, or you could have one great run in the monthlies. Both of these avenues gave you an opportunity to play in Red Bull Volo Legacy. Now, the big issue that I had with Red Bull Volo Legacy, despite the fact that this was a revolutionary event, given the fact that this was the first event that introduced custom maps, the issue I had with Road to Red Bull Volo Legacy was that the players that qualified for Red Bull already were still eligible to play in the monthlies. Now, I understand why this was decided upon by the organizers. Basically, the concept is that you have prize money for these monthlies, so you cannot just say, hey, you cannot play in this. But it also made it weird for the qualification spots, because oftentimes you ended up with a Marine Lord versus Beastie finals, where both of the players were already qualified for the event. So you ended up with the 3rd place, 4th place, 22nd place, getting the ticket to Red Bull. Obviously, 22 is an exaggeration, but you get the point. I think the event could have been a little bit more intriguing if it was a do or die type of a bracket, where indeed only the players that are eligible to qualify for Red Bull and haven't yet done so would have played. They play that bracket, and the finals is really just a decider between two players on who gets the ticket to Heidelberg. With that being said, as I said, there were some pros and cons. I'm putting Road to Red Bull Volo Legacy to a B tier. It was a solid event. It introduced a lot of good things. But I feel like, especially with qualified players playing in the monthlies, I feel like a lot of hype was lost because of that. Now, coming up is an event that you probably never heard of. As I said, I tried to do my cutoff such that, we avoid regional events and those events that didn't really have extensive English coverage, but turns out I wasn't really able to, because believe it or not, we do have a $15,000 event that you probably never heard of. You look at the logo, and indeed this is Chinese. The event is called Glorious Evolution Battle. Glorious Evolution Battle was one of the first AoE4 events, dating back all the way to December 2021, and it was the largest non-English event ever held in AoE4. $15,000 prize pool sponsored by Western Digital. The event was organized by the Chinese streaming platform Douyu, and it was held only for Chinese players. Naturally, there was basically no English coverage of that, partly because rarely any information was available. I think I do remember myself being interested in casting the finals of it for my YouTube, and I think I may have ended up doing so. If you start digging in my old videos, you might find something like that, but I actually don't recall casting it. I remember thinking about casting it, but I don't know if I actually ended up doing so. Obviously, comparing this event to any of the previous and upcoming events is extremely difficult. It's a regional event. It was a major one, and it delivered some close sets based on the scores available on Wikipedia. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to put it into the MISC tier. This is where I put all the events that, don't really belong anywhere, that are difficult to compare with others. Going up, we will have Golden League coming up. This is the first EGC Golden League, and at the time it was announced, which was the March and April of 2022, this was the largest Age of Empires 4 event to date. $125,000 prize pool, sponsored partially by EGC, partially by Microsoft. And it used a league system where in each of these league rounds, we had very different settings. We had stuff like off-meta combat, open maps, and exclusive civilizations as well, which in retrospective looks awkward because now that's a pretty standard setting for tournaments, but anyway. And we had this league system where for every single round, you had a bracket, and then based on the placement, you got some points. Based on the points, you either made it to the playoffs or not. Now, the event had a pretty complex structure, so you went from this league system into an 8-player GSL groups, and then obviously GSL goes into 4-player single elimination and such. Now, I had a very tough time judging this event because it was revolutionary in many ways. It brought in this league system. This was one of the first events to deviate from a single elimination bracket in AoE4. Not the first one, N4C actually preceded it with it, but N4C was a long LAN event, whereas for Golden League, this was more like the weekendly structure that we have seen from previous events. So, among online events, Golden League was one of the first to introduce a non-single elimination bracket, and I think it worked well. We had a lot of cool players showing up for this. We really had a lot of the names that kind of stopped playing ever since then. But, Hot, Psyarch, just a couple of players I can think about right from the top of my head. And you had a dozen others that were very good at that time. And we had some cool matches. Now, the main issue that I had with this event was actually twofold. The league brackets were single elimination, unless I messed something up checking up the data, but I think I'm right about that. Actually, never mind. It was double elimination, which is something I appreciate. Anyways, despite the double elimination, all of these league rounds were pretty much dominated by the same people. Same top 8, same top 16, top 4. So, despite the fact that you had all these cool players in there, they got eliminated early on, pretty much. The other thing that I was kind of missing from this event is a bit of a juice, honestly. I know it's a little rough to say, but compared to some of the other events that you will see in this video series, Golden League didn't do anything crazily special. I think at the time this event was held, it was as good as it gets, but when you look at the entire 2-year span of AoE4 esports, I think there were some better events than this, so I cannot really put it into the S tier. This is to this day the second largest event of AoE4, and comparing it to something like Red Bull or comparing it to something like some other events, I don't think it delivered as much as, the size would indicate. Speaking of Golden League, we do have Golden League 2 coming up here, which was a smaller event than Golden League 1, only $70,000 price pool, but the event was also shorter as well, so there is that. Now, it used the same league system as Golden League 1, but this time around we did have custom maps. That is something that was introduced with Road to Red Bull Volo in mid-2022, but by 2023, when we had Golden League 2, we had custom maps, and I think that was a big step ahead compared to Golden League 1. These unique league-style settings, these unique settings in general that Golden Leagues use, work a lot better when you have a suitable map tool for them, and that's something that was available for Golden League 2. I also enjoyed the unique settings more for Golden League 2 than I've done for Golden League 1. As I said, for Golden League 1, you had stuff like off-meta combat, open maps, which is cool, but when you look at Golden League 2, it was revolutionary in many ways. First of all, you had a round where you had no stone structures, including keeps, and I think that was one of the more entertaining sets or series, tournament, sections, I guess. It was one of the more intriguing tournament sections to watch because it just completely redefined the meta in many ways for that part of the league. Now, when you look at Golden League 2, you had some other parts as well, including a 12 villagers start, which accelerated games a lot, and it was pretty much the predecessor of the Empire Wars game mode. This actually was organized before Empire Wars was announced, I think. So, in a way, especially if you enjoy Empire Wars, that 12 villager start was very reminiscent of that. I think Golden League 2 made a great use of mods, great use of custom maps, and these new things, compared to Golden League 1, supplemented the format a lot better. It was a smaller event than Golden League 1 in a way, but I think what Golden League wants to be was executed a lot better by Golden League 2 than Golden League 1. Golden League 2, to me, is an S tier event. It goes into the highest category because, given what's available in the game, I think it delivered the most. It was a hype event with big names, big prize pool, and the settings delivered some extremely intriguing games, super fun settings, made a great use of the maps, made a great use of the mods, and this puts Golden League 2 into the S tier for me. Now, folks, we will continue on with the second episode very shortly, where I continue to rate all these tournaments that you still see at the bottom of the screen. So if you do not want to miss that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, that helps me greatly as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the second episode of the AoE4 tier list.